Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum. Good morning. Would members of the Economic Development Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum?
All right, good morning, members of committee. I'm very delighted that you're all here. I'd like to get the meeting started. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Members, I'd like to welcome you to the 24th meeting of the Economic Development Committee meeting. I'd like to welcome members of the committee and other members of council who are with us. I don't see any in attendance at the moment, and of course members of the public. For those in the room with us this morning, the screen at the back to my right of the room provides real-time update concerning where we are in the agenda and what's coming up next. And for those at home or for those who are here in the room who wish to follow the debate and the agenda on your computers, tablets, or your smartphone, you may go to www.toronto.ca/council. The Economic Development Committee gratefully acknowledges it is meeting on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Dot, and home. They were home to many diverse people here in this territory. Members, starting the meeting, I'll just run through the agenda. Are there any declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, thank you. Confirmation of the minutes from September 20th. Councillor Hart? All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Thank you. We have some speakers and presentation. We have a list here, and I'll get to that. Madam Clerk, are there any additional communications that I'm not aware of? No. Okay, seeing none, thank you. Okay, members, I will now proceed with respect to doing a run-through on the agenda. There are a number of presentations and so on, and if there are anything that you'd like to have held, just please let me know. So, beginning with ED 24.1, outcomes of the 2017 North American Indigenous Game. We will hold that item for presentation. ED 24.2, Toronto Arts Council 2016 Annual Allocations. I believe Ms. Cocker's here and or Ms. Hopkinson. I don't see them at the moment. I'll just hold this just in case they decide to come to speak to this. Otherwise, if there's, is there any interest from a member for holding this item? Okay, if there are none, and since they're not here. I believe there's a presentation. There's a presentation? It says an action. Okay, so I will hold, okay, hold for presentation. I will hold it then. Thank you. Didn't read down that far. Okay, we also have ED 24.3, TOHealth. It's an update, so I'll hold that. We have a presentation. We'll hold that item. ED 24.4, planting the seed for economic growth in Toronto's food and beverage sector. It's a presentation for that item, so we'll hold that. ED 24.5, the economic and social impact of accessible, high-quality childcare system in Toronto. We'll hold that. There's a presentation. ED 24.6, declaring a Digital Literacy Day in Toronto. And that item is here in front of us. Councillor Holland would like to hold? Okay, thank you. Councillor Holland is holding. ED 24.7, grants to specialized collection museums. So moved. Councillor Grimes is moving that. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Thank you. ED 24.8, Toronto's Economic Bulletin. Okay. Councillor Hart is moving adoption. Thank you. That item. Thank you very much, staff. It seems that we had the color printer working for that item, so that worked out quite nicely. Thank you, Mr. Williams and team. Okay, folks, we are moving to ED 24.1, and we have a presenter. We have Mr. I'm just getting my name here. It's Mr. Michael Switchkovich. I hope I've got that, Michael, and perhaps you can help me if I didn't pronounce your name properly, but Michael Switchkovich. Michael, good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
You have 5 minutes, and you have someone with you. I don't have the name of that person. Perhaps you can introduce her.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairperson Thompson and members of the committee. My name is Michael Svitkovich, the General Manager of the Toronto 2017 North American Indigenous Games that just completed. And to my right, is the Chief Executive Officer of the Games, who made her way about 5 hours here for this meeting. So I want to acknowledge and welcome our Chief Executive Officer, Marcia Trudeau-Bomberry.
Hello.
I also want to acknowledge the acknowledgement that this committee made in acknowledging the traditional lands that these games were taking place on, and this meeting as well. I'd also like to thank Harold Ma and Laura Jane for their help and guidance throughout these games. This was a very this was a very unique set of games compared to Invictus and Pan Am and Para-Pan Am, in the sense that we had 1 year. to put these games on, and the only reason this was able to happen was because of the collaboration of provincial sport organizations, our government funding partners, and very specifically the City of Toronto, who came on board the moment that the Games was lost in the United States. And the City of Toronto stepped in right away and said that this is an opportunity for us to move forward in reconciliation and to host a world-class event. Perry Bellegarde, who's the National Chief Assembly of First Nations, addressed the thousands in attendance at Aviva Centre at the opening ceremonies. I know that many here were part of that great event. Mayor John Tory joined us and Marcia at year one at David Pico Square. That was 1 year and 5 days out in the games, and it was also our first week on the job. And so it was a pretty extraordinary countdown for us compared to others. I'll just very briefly by the numbers, we had almost 4,500 participants during the games, 3,647 from Canada. We had 2 cultural festivals, but the main one was at York University. 14 sports, all traditional Olympic-style sports, with 3 being gifts from the Indigenous people. We used many world-class venues from the Pan Am and Para-Pan Am Games, so we talk about legacy. It's certainly something that was important for us to recognize. We also used municipal venues such as the Humber Valley Golf and Country Club. Our original games budget was about $10.4 million. We were able to increase our revenues. We received about $500,000 in grants. I would like to acknowledge Toronto Arts Council, who I believe is in the room today, who provided us with some monies that was greatly used to bring Toronto-centric Indigenous performers to our cultural festivals, and of course, the $400,000 from the City of Toronto. Our media partners were extensive, and it was very important for us to be able to tell the story. 3 presenting sponsors, Hydro One, Rogers, and Unifor, and a myriad of sponsors that we had throughout the games. I'll turn it over a little bit to Marcia just to speak about the community impact that this had and the funds provided by the City of Toronto and how it went towards our community tour and specifically some of our education.
Ani bojo Marcia Dijna Kos and Ishnabe Kwenda we kwam donjaba. Thank you again, echoing Michael. I'd like to be thankful for the acknowledgement that was provided at the start. Also to acknowledge that the footprint of our games included not only the Mississaugas of New Credit and the Haudenosaunee people, but also the Mississaugas of Scugog. As well, we recognize the Métis Nation of Ontario and the Huron-Wendat. In the lead up to the games, it was really important for us as a host society to engage in a community tour, and what this did for us was help us to create excitement and awareness around the games and what these games are, but also to be an educational piece within the City of Toronto. We are fortunate enough that though it wasn't in our original budget, we did make space for a community tour portion, as well as community outreach initiatives. And we had a great staff that was able to really have that ability to get into the school boards. So we did have 4 school boards that were part of our pilot, which included educational presentations within the Toronto District School Board, Toronto Catholic District School Board, as well as Dufferin and Durham school boards as well.
While this was a sporting event, it's very well known as the past 8 games that have been hosted for the North American Indigenous Games of Culture is equally important on this front. And so hosting a cultural festival on the campus of York University allowed us every day to have not only medal ceremonies, but think of a powwow and Indigenous marketplace as well. The highlight of the games was no doubt the opening ceremonies that took place out of Aviva Centre, the home of Tennis Canada and Rogers Cup here in the City of Toronto, with 10,000 people in the stadium. It was live streamed on CBC and was the most watched event on CBC this year from a sports standpoint outside of the Stanley Cup playoffs. For the sake of time, I'm going to move through just so that we can talk very briefly about the economic impact that these games had. First of all, the most important moment, I believe, for this entire project was April 19th, when here at Nathan Phillips Square, we proudly watched Mayor Tory declare April 19th Team 88 Day in support of reconciliation and the Truth Reconciliation Commission. From a financial standpoint, as I mentioned, we had an original budget of about $10.4 million. We reached about 11.3. Our original report from the Canadian Sport Tourism Alliance gives us about an $18 million economic impact result. That does not include about $7 million of our operating budget that was also used within the City of Toronto. So certainly for the investment that we're very proud of from the City of Toronto, we hopefully did well to those taxpayers here in the city. We are fortunate that we will be announcing later this month a $500,000 surplus that will go towards the Aboriginal Sport and Wellness Council of Ontario and their initiatives for not only sport and recreation, but health and wellness programs throughout Ontario, and specifically the Urban Indigenous program that they are launching here within the City of Toronto. For the sake of time, Councillor Thompson will conclude there. But again, a sincere thank you, miigwech, to those in the room that supported this initiative. It truly was a remarkable legacy for the city, but also for the Indigenous youth across Turtle Island.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Michael. Members, questions? Okay. Councillor Grimes? Okay. So I just have a couple of questions for you. When and where will be the next games?
That's a terrific question. After this meeting, I'll be traveling to Whitehorse for the NAG Council meetings. They will be deciding the 2020 games. There were rumors that it would be in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but nothing has been official yet. We'll hopefully get more information this weekend.
Right. You talked about the community impact and so on, and I saw some of the media and talked about families coming in to support family members and so on, and it became an excursion in the city and rekindling of relationships and so on. Can you maybe just highlight that a little bit more and the response that you received from those participating? I saw one article and it talked about, I think, a young woman from, I think it was Hamilton she was from, and her relatives had come to see her and how proud, and helped her just kind of establish a real sense of self and identity. And maybe you can speak to that with respect to the games as such in terms of the benefits.
Actually, if it pleases the council, I'll turn to Marcia to talk a little bit about that, the impact and specifically the legacy campaign of Team 88, because I think that really ties into it.
Yeah, I think one of the important things about these games is that when we welcomed 5,000 Indigenous youth from across North America, we understood that when an athlete travels, it's not just the athlete traveling. When and where it's possible, they usually come with aunts and support from the family, and that I think speaks to the economic impact, but it also speaks to how the family unit is really important among Indigenous people, and the support is there for something like that. And when we talk about the movement around the TRC calls to action, 88 specifically calls on all levels of government to support these games as a means for long-term athlete development. And from the point of view, Indigenous point of view, athlete development is very much inclusive of the support network that helps the athlete succeed. So that's one of the things that I think we were quite pleased about, seeing all the families that showed up to support. You can see it at all the venues that we used across the footprint of the games, and as well as within the cultural festival site.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for the response to my question. Those are all my questions and so on. To speak.
If I may, Chair, we do have a gift for the City of Toronto as a recognition, a token of the support from the City of Toronto in hosting the Toronto 2017 North American Indigenous Games.
Sure. We'll accept that after. I just want to make a couple of comments and then we will do the acceptance of that. So I'm going to move receipt of the presentation. I want to thank the presenters for being here this morning. I know that when I was first approached about funding and the EDC team, Mike Williams and others, we sat down and we had that conversation, and of course how imminent it was because of the changes that had taken place, and there was some apprehension or fear that it wouldn't happen because we weren't able to kind of bring the funding together, and not just from the City of Toronto, but all the different elements of funding that had to be brought forward. But I thought all of us actually decided that this was something that needed to happen. And irrespective of the issues around amassing the resources at the time, we still had enough time to be able to take the effort forward and so on. And I was so pleased that the organizers, your work, Michael, and the work of others and so on, in terms of bringing it all together with all the different partners, not dissimilar to any other initiatives that we have done in the City of Toronto and so on. We all collaborated because the essence of this is certainly, you know, the Indigenous people's history, but also the opportunity for the young athletes who are participating in the games, and as you pointed out, the families coming into the city, and the sense of renewal and the sense of you know, focus and drawing some attention and light to excellent talents and so on in our country. And it was an important milestone for me personally in terms of our elements of participating and so on, and ensuring that we could celebrate you know, the Indigenous people and their contribution in terms of making this country, the country where we've all come from someplace else, to borrow an opportunity here to establish ourselves and so on. And so the enrichment of this collaboration for all of us should be utilized as a catalyst in terms of going forward. And how do we do that? So the next game will be the next location and thereafter and so on. So we should all be building on this, and we should all be looking at what area, what events do we really like individually so that we can support that throughout the country and so on, because this is a national event. It's not just a local Toronto event. It happens in Toronto this year, which is fantastic, but where it goes next and thereafter, how do we continue to support? And I really like the fact, and it's interesting that, you know, we have, if you will, a Toronto Arts Council coming up. And you talk about that collaboration, the resources that's been contributed by the Arts Council to showcase Indigenous performers and entertainers and so on. Because we are a city around culture, and it's all different elements of culture and so on. And I think that it's really a positive recognition in terms of the collaboration and participation. And so the Arts Council do a lot of things. We know that, a lot of great things. This is another great thing that they have actually done in actually facilitating the opportunity that there were resources available for Indigenous performers and so on to be able to highlight and showcase their talent and their skills and so on. And I think this is an opportunity for us to use this as a benchmark in terms of going to another level of excellence, both in terms of collaboration, watching performers and entertainers, as well as the athletes and so on, and the families. And I saw the photos of, unfortunately I was able to get to York University, but I saw the photos, and I was amazed, actually, the number of people that were there celebrating. And so congratulations to you and both and the team of organizing an amazing event. Congratulations to all those who were involved and the levels of government and their participation. And I'm looking forward to the next event. And of course, please let us know when it's back in Toronto, because we want to make it bigger and better as always. I just want to remind you that it's my understanding that Toronto is the center of the universe, so everything that happens in Toronto, it's big, right? So you can write that down as well, so thank you. So those are my comments. So I'd like to move receipt of the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And I guess we could receive your recognition.
Thank you. Just to recognize the contribution from the City of Toronto, we do have a framed set of our gold, silver, and bronze medals that were provided to
That's fantastic. I'll come around and I'll come around here and I'll invite members along with Mr. Williams and others to come and receive this with me, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, good morning. I see some familiar faces. Now we have members, we're moving to ED 24.2, and I'm going to then turn the floor over to Ms. Crocker, Chair of the Board of the Toronto Arts Council, and I'll ask her to introduce the panel of distinguished members that are here with you this morning. Let me just start the time over again, and thank you very much for coming. And I see Claire. Good morning.
Great. Am I on?
You are on.
Very good. The red light. Councillor Thompson and members of the Economic Development Committee, thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak with you today. I'm Susan Crocker, and I chair the board of the Toronto Arts Council, and I'm joined today by Kevin Ray, the Toronto Art Council's Community Arts Officer, and Claire Hopkinson, our Director and CEO. Susan Wright is also with us. She's our Head of Operations and everything that makes us go. We are here today to report on the Art Council's 2016 programs and activities. And this is a story of real achievement. The city's increased support for the arts contributes directly to Toronto's reputation as a global city with a future focus. Our artists and arts organizations are ambassadors welcoming the world to our door, and they are contributing directly to our livability, our humanity, and our economy. These are reasons to be in Toronto. This slide illustrates Toronto Art Council's grants funding increases since 2012. Clearly, this committee, under your leadership, Councillor Thompson, has made a very strong commitment to the city's artists and arts organizations. In turn, artists and arts organizations are making Toronto a global centre of creativity and giving Torontonians opportunities to both experience and participate in the arts. Let's consider these numbers, these final numbers from 2016. The Council delivered $18.2 million in funding to 1,030 artists and organizations. For that contribution, the artistic community delivered programming in every single ward and presented an astonishing 19,500 events, attended by 9.5 million people. Organizations supported by the Council raised $60 million in ticket sales, $52 million in donations, offered employment to 17,500 artists, and encouraged 26,000 volunteers to give their time to the city. All of this has been done at a cost of $7.23 per Toronto resident over the entire year. It's a very high return. This slide demonstrates the pent-up demand in Toronto arts sector that was very much a response to or released by the increased funding. In fact, applications to our programs have just about doubled in the past 4 years. The competition continues to be rigorous. Only about 40% of all applicants are in fact successful. It's not easy to get an Art Council grant. We turn away many applicants, and with that, opportunities for more creation, more employment, and more positive city impact. Now we'll turn to the city's priorities for arts investment. Kevin and Claire are going to take you through the following slides to demonstrate how the Toronto Arts Council's activities and investment is making an impact in each of these critical priority areas. Kevin.
Thank you, Susan. Regarding Priority A, increased arts activity outside the downtown core. A public opinion survey tells us that the top barriers to attending the arts are proximity, cost, and time. We know that those living outside the downtown core have fewer opportunities to enjoy the arts. In 2016, TAC invested $1.48 million in programs to increase arts activity and community access outside the downtown core. We can confirm that many thousands more have attended events in the inner suburbs. TAC's new online grant system populates an interactive map showing the location of TAC-funded programming in every ward of Toronto. In 2016, TAC supported over 500 events outside the downtown core. City Priority B, increased opportunities for young and emerging artists. Beginning in 2013, TAC has invested in programs specifically designed to create opportunities and support leadership for young and emerging artists. In 2016, 73 grants to youth-led arts projects gave over 2,500 young people the chance to participate in valuable creation-based leadership programming outside the downtown core. As you can see, investment has led directly to results.
Thanks, Kevin. So Toronto Arts Council aligns with the city priority of leveraging further investment through our Catalyst grants. So here are 6 examples of organizations that received their first funding from Toronto Arts Council and are continuing today to make a huge impact on Toronto, including TIFF, which brings the world to our door, and Remix, which focuses on the talent potential of youth. Hot Docs offers an impressive example. As the world's largest documentary film festival, Hot Docs is attended by over 200,000 people a year, but the business of the festival is also key. Hot Docs recently attracted 2,666 delegates who attended 1,130 buyer-seller meetings. Excellent. So TAC also supports 221 established arts organizations that in turn leverage significant dollars from this investment. With $2.8 million in new funding, these organizations have raised an additional $24 million in support from other sources. So these operating organizations serve as creative hubs for Toronto and include leaders in their field, such as Opera Atelier, Tarragon Theatre, or Vibe Arts, which is very active in your ward, Councillor Thompson. Over time, Toronto's established arts organizations raise $16.48 for every $1 invested by TAC.
Thank you, Claire. City Priority D, increased opportunities for community-engaged activities. This slide shows us that TAC's annual funding for community arts programming has increased by $1.4 million since 2012, corresponding to growth in the appetite for community-engaged arts, particularly in the inner suburbs. Increased funding led to the presentation of over 360 community-engaged arts events in areas throughout Toronto in 2016. Funding goes to projects like outdoor murals or youth hip-hop programming like we did when I worked at Unity Charity last year. New TAC funding has meant that we have been able to support and stabilize many critically important community arts organizations working across the city.
Improved cultural facilities. Arts organizations that run performance venues offer a vital service to hundreds of nonprofit groups and individual artists who require space to present their work. TAC launched a performing arts facility program in 2015, offering financial support to those host organizations. So this assists both the organization's capacity to maintain these facilities and the work of the independent artists and small organizations who use them for programming. F, new partnerships and collaborations. So in addition to the many valuable partnerships between TAC and city agencies and departments, we're also working to increase collaboration among Toronto's arts organizations. So TAC's Open Door program, first launched in 2014, has supported now 38 new collaborations and partnerships. Innovative projects that address pertinent challenges such as the use of public space, access and equity, audience development, and technological innovation. The fact that almost half of TAC's grants are available to first-time applicants and new ideas means that innovation and opportunity flow into the arts sector each and every year. Increased opportunities for Indigenous artists and arts organizations, as was previously mentioned. We now have, in 2015, launched an Indigenous Arts Projects program specifically for Indigenous artists, collectives, and organizations.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to wrap up with a final note on the Art Council's operations. Your Arts Council is a highly efficient organization accountable through a rigorous governance model. Less than 10% of the city's grants allocation to the council is in fact spent on operations. This is extremely low in comparison to other arts councils and to the non-for-profit sector as a whole. In fact, it is too low, and we are committed to working with City Culture on a plan to increase our financial flexibility and ensure that we have good muscles and infrastructure behind the complex granting systems and activities that we're engaged in. We continue to forge ahead with our new strategic plan and are implementing a comprehensive equity framework to guide our granting and our operations. With the recent approval of tax equity framework, I'm very proud to report on our continued progress on equity and inclusion. Our board is firmly committed to taking a leadership role and ensuring that the board, all the board committees, the juries, and staff are representative of the city that we serve. We are rapidly achieving that objective, and in fact, being able to do that and demonstrating that artistic quality is in fact getting higher and richer is really a moment of great pride. We're working with deaf artists and artists with disabilities as well to increase access. We've introduced an incredibly successful newcomer and refugee arts program. We look forward to working with this committee and with all of council as we set new targets for arts funding and impact and develop revenue tools that will help us collectively achieve this goal. As Toronto moves into center stage globally, it is a really very exciting time to be creating, participating in, and attending the arts. We're very grateful for your continued support, and please, any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hart, a question?
Yes, thank you. Just a question, 9.18% sounds like a very low overhead cost, operating cost. What would the appropriate percentage be? And what is the service impact of 9.18 versus what the appropriate level should be?
Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Susan because she oversaw and conducted the research, benchmarking the Toronto Art Council to our sister organizations across the system. Susan?
I wonder if you can come to the mic or turn the mic so.
Sorry. Certainly the comparators with other organizations are much, much higher. I would say we have worked very hard not to affect service levels, but it does mean that our staff are not compensated at the same levels as other organizations. It also means that we are just constantly in a state of trying to figure out how to manage from one thing to the next. Our new grants operating system is terrific, and that has saved us. We've managed to make some savings after that initial investment, but it's a struggle, and we are running at a deficit this year, and which we have brought to everybody's attention. We cannot continue to operate at this level.
And can you just, what is the comparative percentage?
So other arts councils are at between 14 and 20%. Toronto does not have some of the costs associated with other councils in terms of translation and travel because we are local, but an effective number is certainly above 9.
Thank you very much. You've got more? Okay, that's fine. Please continue.
Just one more question.
No problem. You've got 5 minutes.
You mentioned that 40% of applicants are funded. If you had the appropriate funding level, what percentage would be funded?
This is a great question, and in fact, grants officers report on that when they bring forward each portfolio for approval. So Claire, can you give us the rundown?
It does vary between program and discipline. So our operating clients are, 90% funded because they come every year. But something like our visual media arts, where there's incredible competition, the acceptance rate is about 22%. Anything below 20%, it would not be worth actually having the program. It would be holding out false hopes. Certainly, what we do is each grants officer comes to the board and says, if we had had more money, we would have funded these applications of excellence, so another 12 or another 15. So it does vary from round to round, but I think getting closer to a 30 or 35% would be greatly well used and greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hart. Anyone else? Councillor Kelly?
I'm going to go from large scale down to smaller scale. RISE, an organization that whose meetings I've attended. Are you familiar with them?
I am.
I'm a sloppy reader, I guess because I read quickly. I didn't see anything in here with a grant attached to it. Did I miss it?
Sorry, what was the
Did
word?
you say pride?
Rise.
No.
Rise. Sorry,
Rise,
I misheard you.
We do not fund Rise, actually. They're an organization that I've been trying to encourage in my short time at the TAC to get them to apply to the community arts program, but they have yet to apply.
I'm sorry, say it again?
They have yet to apply to the Toronto Arts Council's community arts program.
But do you think, from what you know of them, that they should, that they would be eligible?
Absolutely.
So do I have to kick some butt?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
One thing that our arts officers are doing is heading proactively out into the community. I think they're calling it setting up sort of pop-up granting offices to reach out to organizations that haven't graced our application system and just make sure that there is knowledge and confidence in applying. So it's a great question.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kelly. Anyone else? Okay. Just a few questions for me. On page 115, your grants, visual arts, media, item number 53, the League of Ladies Wrestlers. What is that? What is the visual and media arts associated with that?
Well, they're highly adjudicated, highly well-received adjudicated. I think the bigger issue here is many arts organizations and
No, but
individuals.
please, Ms. Hopkinson.
Well, they just love
To the
to have-
question, I wanted to understand, what is that group? What do they do? What would I be able to see from a visual arts presentation from the League of Ladies Wrestlers? What is that?
Sorry,
I'm
Susan's just looking for it.
looking for the,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was at the Gladstone, as I recall. I have seen them a few years ago.
What do they do?
Yeah, we're just getting it.
Well, they're a visual arts collective, and they
Okay.
do performance art as well around a visual arts exhibition, as I recall. And we're just.
I mean, I'm fine with that. That's
Yeah.
what I wanted to understand. Well, I did go through this list. There's a number of things that I picked out. That one, for me, was quite unique, so I wanted to understand that what it was. All right, we'll maybe come back to that if that's okay. On page 3, where you talk about a report for EDCs being prepared by Nordic City is documenting the impact of new funding, dispersed and so on. I'm just wondering, how will that report differ from your presentation today?
Well, we haven't seen the results of that, so we're not going to, I couldn't tell you exactly how they will differ. We're hoping that they're not going to differ very much once they see the results.
Right.
And that report will come to you, and we'll be able to speak to it more fully when it's out. We've been collaborating fully with them to give them as much information as we possibly can. I think the key aspect of difference will be that they're going to be studying mainly operating clients over a number of years, whereas the projects and collectives that have been funded more recently with new funding will not be captured.
So it's a
in that.
snapshot.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand with respect to that. So, I did have one more question. I think it was mentioned about the 360, was that new community events that you mentioned, sir? Those are new community events?
I can't remember what you're referring to exactly.
While you're looking that up, I'm just going to read to you the.
I'm sorry, why I'm looking what up?
Well, Kevin is looking
okay,
that up.
I see, okay.
I just wanted to go back. We found the description. There are so many, you see.
Sure.
League of Lady Wrestlers, Island Rumble 3, a performance wrestling event by female identifying performance artists celebrating female identities. So this last one took place at Artscape Gibraltar Point. The one I saw a few years ago was at Gladstone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so sorry about that.
worries.
Your question again, please?
So I just wanted to understand a little bit more. You talked about, I believe, 360 new, were they new community-related events or that was funded? Was that what you said in your remarks? And were
yeah,
those events themselves out of the core of the city, or were they all around Toronto?
That's all around Toronto.
Right, and how many of that percentage would have been sort of in areas like Etobicoke, East York, Scarborough, and North York?
I don't know that information offhand.
Well,
Well, maybe you can give that to me later on. I'm just curious, so that would be helpful.
but the community arts file generally is more focused in the inner suburbs than it is downtown.
Okay,
So a majority would be outside the downtown?
fair enough. Okay, thank you.
But we can send that information to Councillor Thompson. We'll
Yeah,
do that.
those are all my, my questions. To speak? Speakers? Councillor Grimes.
Just very briefly, I just want to thank the Toronto Arts Council. I had the opportunity to sit on there a few years ago on the board, and I was just blown away by, what the arts encompasses in this city. It's amazing the work you do in the city, and it's great to see that this committee and council over the years has been increasing that funding. You see those charts heading north, and it's an opportunity for me to give a shout out to Lakeshore Arts in my ward, which does absolutely fantastic. You think about Mimico and Lakeshore. Lakeshore Arts is on the street front, on the main street, and they do great work, and I know they get funding for you. So it's keep up the great work. We hope that chart keeps going north for you guys. So thank you.
We agree, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grimes. Anyone else to speak? Okay, seeing none. I will just also add my voice to this report and to move receipt of the presentation and the recommendation here, which is to receive the information, which is great. The Toronto Arts Council, I think, is one of those initiatives that the city, in collaboration with others, have actually brought together, which is, when you look at it, it was a great initiative because of what it does. It provides a clearinghouse opportunity. It assesses, it contributes towards ideas around policy changes, direction, and so on. So there is a, if you will, there's an arm of an agency of the city that's working with the industry on the ground and collaborating. So you've got sort of a combination of, the streets, the neighborhood, the big picture of the city, the large organization, and so on. And this organization continues to, I believe, excel on an annual basis in a way that personify what I believe is this city's intent, which is to be that city of arts, culture, digital media, and so on. As you know, we're hoping for a UNESCO designation very shortly, and that will help us in a way to build on this profile. There's no doubt in my mind that we've come a long way, and we have a lot more to do, a lot more ways to go, and so on. And we hear and we know that this is a well-run organization, well-led by its chair, executive director, and all of the talented people that work in the organization. I never worry about the Toronto Arts Council. Even when people come to me and say, well, I didn't get any money from them, how dare they? And I'll say, well, because you didn't meet the criteria. They're pretty good at getting through the information, assessing, evaluating, making decisions. And I spent the last couple of days reading through every one of these things And that's why I asked you about the wrestling, because I did go through it, and it wasn't as clear. I just wanted to get some information on that. And I think that what we do know about culture for the city, it has created a huge wave of people wanting to live here, people wanting to work here, young people wanting to be here because this is a cool place to be. And that collaboration and interaction and so on between intergenerational folks and so on. I mean, look at the Six Dad and Drake. I mean, they're a team. They're an item, right? I say intergenerational, and that's fantastic. And there's more of that in this particular city and so on. And so we all stand behind the work that you're doing and support you. I'm really impressed by the number that was quoted, and you talk about spending less than 10% on operation. That is amazing and stressful, difficult, all at the same time. So I'm glad you're keying in on that, because that can't continue forever with the expectation that we're going to get the great results, because after time, either people will go elsewhere because they can get more money for their talent and not having to work as hard. And so there's a real need to compensate people, and also to build, as you talked about, the muscles, Susan, and the infrastructure. And I think that's extremely important, because if we lose that opportunity, then much of what our desires and our intention is, which is building on this opportunity of generating business with the understanding that arts and culture are an important faucet with respect to the city and how it works, then we all will lose as a whole. So I'm thankful that you're able to continue this, and I'm hopeful that we can work with you going forward in order to continue your success. So thank you very much. All right, so members, we'll move motion to adopt the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. All right, we're moving right along. We are now moving to ED 24.3, and that's TOHealth. And we have Ella Koritz-Smith, Executive Director of Toronto Health. Ms. Smith, are you here? Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. Didn't see you leaning there. Great. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you.
A little technical.
Give me a second, sorry.
If you'd like to.
That's great. Thank you.
While this is happening. Thank you.
Are we all set?
Yeah, we're all set.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, and welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, councillors, thank you very much for having me here to give you an update about TOHealth. The City of Toronto has been supporting TOHealth for the last 2 years. It's a 3-year commitment of $50,000 a year for 3 years. And we are now finishing year 2, going into year 3 of that commitment. So in 10 minutes, which is not enough time, I'm going to give you an overview of where we are, some of the accomplishments we've had, some of the programs we are planning on completing going forward, and then, perhaps not in this session, but as a follow-up, we'll then present what we see as the requirement for TOHealth to continue to do the good work that we've been doing, and if the City of Toronto feels it's important to do so, we would be delighted to continue to have your support. This is a personal mission for me. I'm a business development professional working in the biotech space for the last 12 years. I've been coached over and over again to move to Boston to do that, and I don't want to. I would like to stay in Toronto and build a career here, and that is why this mission of TOHealth, to raise the profile of the Toronto region's health sciences cluster and build it as a top 5 global ecosystem in the next 10 years, is so important. because there are many, many people like me who want to live in Toronto because it's an amazing city, but want to have amazing careers in biotech as well. And to do that, we need to build an ecosystem. And that's what TOHealth is trying to do. So why health, you ask? Two things. Firstly, it's because we all care. This is the ultimate double bottom line. We are all patients. Or we love a patient or we know a patient. 40% of us are going to be diagnosed with cancer. Think of that. It's crazy. So this is a sector, an industry sector where everybody cares. But it also is a huge business. I don't have to tell you these numbers. $6 billion spent on healthcare in Ontario every year. That's 41% of the budget, right? $7 billion in R&D in Ontario. It's huge. And these are just some of the numbers. Clearly, industry plays a major role, $8 billion in revenue for pharma, med tech, et cetera, et cetera. This is a huge business about which everybody cares personally. And that's what makes it such an opportunity. So I just wanted to show you a short video that we made because, believe me, most people don't realize what we have here in Toronto. And this is what this video is meant to show you. So please, let's hope this works.
We share an important goal to promote Toronto and our province, Ontario, and indeed our country, Canada, as an international hub for research, innovation, and most importantly, for opportunity.
The challenge for us, and this is why you're going to be so important to this, is to go out and exploit that in a positive way and make sure that people know about the opportunity that is Toronto. The incredible institutional excellence we have, whether it be our post-secondary institutions, our medical institutions, our scientific research, and so on, that they will say to themselves, you know, that's a place I've got to be.
$14 billion worth of research every year by our government, by our industry, by our academic institutions. These are some of the very eye-opening points to people around the world.
We just had so many things going for us in terms of our quality of life, the talent of our people, the opportunities here, the critical mass of innovation and excellence that we've built up in areas like life sciences. And when you took across, I think, 40 different measurements, this city finished first. People that have come to my office that I can't even talk about yet that are going to come here, major global companies, because they understand the talent pool we have here, they understand the quality of life we have here, and make sure they see what's great about this city, both in terms of how we live, but also in terms of the brain power and the critical mass that we have here. And that in turn will lead to incredible investment in this city.
We need to do a lot of work to make our city, our province, and our country known in the world. Every one of us needs to become an ambassador.
So there you go. I think we are one of the best hidden secrets globally in terms of the number of assets and the sheer world-class quality of the assets we have in the Toronto region. And that's what we're trying to change. When we talk about our cluster, there are 4 pillars. We don't just talk about companies. We talk about academic institutions. So you can't see that. I'm sorry, it's a tiny slide. Innovation intermediaries like Mars and other research innovation centers. We talk about the commercial institutions, including pharma, biotech, med tech, digital health, as well as the service providers that support this ecosystem. And we talk about the healthcare providers because they're a huge part of this ecosystem as well, all focused on building products, programs, technologies to support patients, but also to create wealth. What's really amazing, and we don't really realize this sitting here, is that what we have in Toronto is a huge innovation hub, right smack dab in the center of the city, and that doesn't happen anywhere else. People see this slide and say, oh my God, 9 research hospitals, a university second only to Harvard, a number of IP disclosures and citations, Queen's Park, the financial district, Mars Discovery District. I mean, you really have an amazing ecosystem right in the center of Toronto, and it's something that I am so passionate about trying to raise to the forefront. And it's something that this city needs to be proud of and needs to talk about more loudly. We have huge cluster strengths in 3 therapeutic areas: oncology, neurological diseases, and cardiovascular and diabetes. And we talk about 4 technology opportunities in regenerative medicine, digital health, AI, imaging, medical devices, and genomics. These are all things that we already have here that are world-class, both research, both companies and commercial, as well as in practice in our clinics. And this is something that we need to understand, and then we need to promote globally to get more investment. But what I believe is that people are starting to take note. Even though we remain this kind of hidden opportunity, people are starting to take note. And some of the things that you saw in that video and some of the deals that you're seeing happening in Toronto are absolutely world-class. Some of the deals just recently, we had the 2nd largest Series A investment from Bayer and Versant Ventures being made in Toronto, Boston, and New York. It's a company called Blue Rock Therapeutics. They're a stem cell company, $225 million invested into that technology. That came out of our research institute here in Toronto. Turnstone Biologics, $41 million. They have an oncolytic virus, a cancer technology, fusion pharmaceuticals, et cetera, et cetera. The major deals are starting to happen here, but not enough. We need to get more awareness out there. And so that's why TOHealth was created. Originally founded by the Board of Trade, we spun out about 2 years ago. Our mission is to be the top 5 global cluster in the next 10 years. And we're going to do that by creating a brand and an identity for the cluster, convening the cluster, and making sure that we have a collaboration alignment within the ecosystem, as well as raising the profile of the cluster globally. We talk about 3 different audiences, and those are the things that we want to get here. We want to anchor corporate investments here, so more global investments anchored in Toronto. That means more companies, more jobs, and more revenue created here. We want to grow the risk capital such that our biotech companies, medtech companies can be supported and funded appropriately as they commercialize. And we want to attract and develop talent, people who have been there, done that, who have created products, and can be based here and build them here. We've done a number of things in the last 2 years. These are just some. The biggest win we've had recently is to bring the MedTech Conference 2020 here to Toronto for the first time outside of the US. This is a global medical device conference that has huge both commercial opportunities, so 300 people, nearly $10 million are expected in revenue, but also the sheer recognition that we have a cluster here that is strong in MedTech is huge and very much global. We've built an event called Toronto Health Innovation Week with our partner Mars. We'll talk a little bit more about that event in 2018. Last year, about 2,000 attendees, 26 different events throughout the city. So it was a festival of health innovation in Toronto, a very important flagship event. We have had a number of investor conferences like Family Office Forum, and we worked with our partners, Montreal and Vivo, to build a venture capital panel at the Bio International Convention. I wanted to note that Montreal and Vivo is an interesting comparator to TOHealth, with budget 2.5 times that of TOHealth, and support from the City of Montreal, the Province of Quebec, and the federal government. TOHealth is industry-led. This is the event that I wanted to point out, and I think I'm out of time here. Health Innovation Week 2018 is going to be a huge opportunity. This is our list of sponsors from last year. There's a notable absence there, which I think we should be correcting, councillors, for next year, and we can talk about what that means perhaps after this. Many things coming up. TOHealth is just starting, and what I really want to point out is that we want to impact health and wealth here, and that's what we need to do all together with your support.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Frakadex.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks very much for your presentation. Your presentation mentions participating in conferences in other cities like Montreal and Berlin, and I was wondering if there's anything being done elsewhere that we could adopt here in Toronto or ask our federal or provincial governments to adopt.
In terms of conferences, events? Mm-hmm. So yes, absolutely. So Health Innovation Week is trying to create that flagship event that focuses on the business of health in Toronto, and frankly, it'd be the only one of its kind in Canada. We're trying to build this kind of partnership event that often happens in Berlin and other places. So that will actually be the event that I would like us to focus on and build. We had first one last year, and I would like to see that being built out year over year as the flagship for the health innovation ecosystem in Toronto.
So do you see a role for like the provincial government in that? And if so, could
Yes.
let us know what's happening with that?
Absolutely. So we're going to finalize our skeleton program, and we'll go forward with an ask to the provincial government today, probably at the Ontario Investment Office, for supporting at that conference. It's about a $500,000 conference budget, and we'll be asking Ontario for $100,000. And we would like to have the same sort of support from the City of Toronto, because it is clearly a center of this activity here.
And the federal government?
So the federal government, I think we will go forward and ask in a different way. The federal FedDev Ontario doesn't support conferences as such, but they support business-to-business interactions. So as we work to bring delegations here for Health Innovation Week, there may be some opportunity to do that. With the federal government, it's a little bit of it has to be a different ask, I think. But I would be delighted to have further conversation about how we can engage both Ontario and the federal government in supporting this conference or the mission of raising the profile. I think it's clearly important that all three levels of government are involved.
Great, thanks very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Councillor Freckowitz. Okay, Councillor Holland.
Thank you, through the chair. And Nala, thanks so much for coming in. It was great to meet with you and learn more about TOHealth a few weeks ago. So tell me more about the bigger conference that's coming here.
The MedTech conference.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a global medical device conference that's run by an organization called AdvaMed. They're the U.S. Medical Device Association. What's interesting is that about a year ago, less so, the CEO of BIO, which is the large international biotechnology organization that runs the big bio conferences, 25,000 people, that basically attracts everybody from around the world every year, has moved over to AdvaMed. So he's now looking to build out the MedTech conference to be like the international conference for medical devices. This year was in San Jose. It's 2,700 people. They're looking to make it more international. They had, I think, 14 different delegations. Canada was the biggest. When they come here, this will be, so it's Philadelphia next year, then it's Boston, then it's Toronto. So we're in good company, right? Like those are the clusters for medical technology. They're looking to have about 3,000 people. They're looking to have a partnering forum, which is what one of the things I was talking about for Health Innovation Week. And it is globally recognized as the medical device conference for North America, right? So the fact that the U.S. organization is coming here to build this here with our ecosystem is amazing. And frankly, about a year ago when we were talking about this, people said, "Oh yeah, they'll never leave the U.S." And then of course they did. Of course they would, because they see the opportunity here. They see the opportunity to grow and expand and become more international, get the international again.
Yeah, and how many people do you expect to attend? The same growth or more?
So I think they're looking at about 3,000 people. So it's a sort of a growth trajectory that they're projecting. I think this year the 2,700 was like the biggest ever, and so then in Boston likely be the biggest ever. So I think if we get over 3,000, we're going to be doing really well. Our own medical device association, MEDIC, is going to forego their own conference for that year and actually take it into this conference, so that will get the attendance higher. But it's truly the CEOs of all the major medtech companies come to this event. And the fact that they're going to be here is a huge opportunity for us.
And is the city funding a portion of that? Is that $50,000 that the city is putting towards that?
I don't know what the city's specific commitment is to that conference. I would hope it's something, and we certainly, as we roll forward towards 2020, I know that the hotels and MTCC are putting in some amount of money towards that from their fund.
Yeah. And then for yourself, for the regular yearly one that you have, you've got a number of funders. I know I have it on the card that you had for last year that you gave me. So have you increased the number of funders? I mean, there's a lot of biotech here.
Yeah, so TOHealth right now, so TOHealth operationally is supported 2/3 by industry.
Yeah.
We have a $400,000 budget, and 2/3 of that comes from our sponsors like Pfizer and Medtronic and Becton Dickinson. A third comes from City of Toronto, City of Brampton, so $100,000, 50-50 a year for 3 years. So that's operational funding for TOHealth. In terms of the week, or of the
Yeah, I've
event,
got it.
Health
This
Innovation
one,
Week.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of that funding came from our partners. And so it was truly industry funded.
Yeah.
But what we want to do this year is make it bigger and make it more sustainable, right? So industry will continue to fund.
Yeah.
We'll absolutely continue to have those and others contribute, but having a base of support from the city and from the province and maybe from the feds, I think would just make this a much more sustainable rolling conference that then grows year over year.
Okay, and then just the final question is, because I was able to speak with staff, and I know that there's some reporting out that you're doing, but your current funding is $50,000, but I guess your request to the committee is that you want additional funding. Is that correct?
Yeah, so absolutely. So we have a 3-year commitment which ends 2018. I do think that going forward, if the city feels it's an important initiative, that $50,000 a year is really not enough. I mean, like I said, Montreal in Vivo has 2.5 times the budget that we do have. And so there will be, I'm hoping, further conversation about that. Additionally and separately, because we are running Health Innovation Week with other partners, including Mars, I think that ask would be a separate conference-related ask for 2018. This is something that's coming up in this year, and certainly something that we should talk about separately from the operational funding, because it just makes sense to do that.
Okay. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Kelly. Question.
Branding is a recent phenomenon, or phenomenon. And I'd like to maybe put you on the spot and ask you what that brand is. We've got a lot of information in front of us, and it's wonderful to read. Drake, for example.
Yeah.
His brand is, I think, can be described in one word: cool. Cool.
Yeah.
What one word would you use to describe the brand that you have in mind for Toronto?
Impact. So in fact, we're working on somewhat shifting the catchy branding. And I would like to come back, by the way, about the fact that branding is a recent thing, because it's not really. But I think impact health, here, that is the message, right? Here is where you can do the research, build a company, and implement it into the hospital. We have all of those things lined up, and they're world-class, and nobody knows about it. So that's what I would say the Toronto Health Sciences brand is. But I do want to comment that there are other clusters that have been doing this for 30+ years. Medical Alley, for example, is a brand of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they've been for the last 30 years saying they are a medical device jurisdiction. They now have more medical device companies per capita than anywhere else. They can take a product through their regulatory system, I think 6 months faster than anywhere else, because they've, for the last 30 years, said medical devices is what we're about. They have a major hospital there, and they have Medtronic headquarters there, so they were able to start with somewhere. And they've been doing that for 30 years. I mean, now, if you go to anywhere in the world, you say Minneapolis, most people know that is a medical device, medical alley, right? So branding is critical. It sounds like it's something we're just kind of doing just because it's new and cool, but I really have to say that it's important to have a message and a story that we can back up with facts, and Toronto certainly has that. We just need the message and the story. We have the facts. Does that?
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Anyone else? Question? Okay, seeing none. I just have a few questions.
Yeah.
If I could. So you have a board of directors?
I have a steering committee, yes.
You have a steering committee?
Yes.
So there's no board of directors? Just a steering committee.
So right now, the way TOHealth, sorry, go ahead, this is a question.
I was just going to ask, what is the difference then between a steering committee and a board of directors?
Technicality. We are an unincorporated entity that is right now administered by Mars Discovery District in kind. They're doing that so I don't have to hire accountants, and it's lovely. The decisions are made by our steering committee that's co-chaired by Paul Lepage, president of TOHealth, and Beverage, who's VP of Innovation at University of Toronto. Because we're unincorporated, they're a governing steering committee, but they're not a legal board.
Okay.
If you know what I mean.
Right.
But my steering committee is the heart and soul of this organization. And they're CEO level individuals from all our partners, our funders, as well as some key organizations in the City of Toronto, including TASM, which is Hospital Association, others, that represent the cluster and that drive the program.
Right. And so what I'm hearing you saying is that we have a lot to offer.
Yes.
We're not really getting our messaging out there. There's a huge opportunity in terms of not only generating revenues for the city, but to create the wow, the jobs, and obviously research. And because we have some of those institutions, we have Hospital Row, which is on University Avenue, if you will, I'll call it that, and you have Mars, you have everything around that area.
Yeah.
So you're saying that there is an opportunity for us to do more. Here are the things that you need in order to advance that doing more. Is that part of what you're saying to us here today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We have a story to tell. We just need to go and tell it.
Right. And take me into 5, 10 years down the road, if we do nothing and if we do what you're asking. And I only have 3 minutes.
So if we do nothing, I think we plod along, right? University of Toronto is a great institution and they go along. I think, St. Mike's and Princess Margaret and Sick Kids Hospitals, they continue to do their work. But I think what we end up foregoing is an ability to bring the global attention here at a time where people are hungry for something else besides investing more in the U.S. I think it is amazingly opportune for us now to say, hey guys, we have a huge untapped opportunity here. We have so many assets to offer. We are close to the U.S., but we're not the U.S. We are close to Europe. We're able to create that next new opportunity for you at the time when people are starting to get tapped out. And I think if we don't seize on that opportunity now, then we continue to plod along, and nobody knows in 10 years from now, we'll be sitting here saying, how come nobody is using the asset? How come nobody knows that Toronto has all these amazing assets and we're still talking about it? I think this is the time now.
Just ask you some questions around conferences. Why are conferences important?
It's the venue, the global venue for Toronto region to be on the stage. There's a number of things that happen at these conferences. Some of them is profile, some of them is being there, meeting with other cluster organizations, meeting with other economic development groups and saying, hey, Toronto is really strong in health sciences. And by the way, when I do that, I often get, oh, so you're not from Montreal? I kid you not. Over and over again. It's amazing. So let's stop that, okay? Let's say, no, we love Montreal, we work with them, but let's now make sure that Toronto is on the health sciences map. They also allow you the opportunity to create the partnerships. And so, for example, I'm going to Bio Europe in Berlin with our partners, BioX clusters. There are 4 clusters, Milan, Torino, Munich, and Catalonia. That we now work with them to internationalize each other's companies. So they're using us as a gateway for their companies into partnering with Toronto. And so we're going to be on a panel with them talking about why Toronto is a great gateway into Canada. And there's an amazing opportunity there to actually create visibility, but also create business, right? We are going to start to see companies from Catalonia coming here and partnering with us and building with us. That's what it's about.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for your answers to our questions. Members, I'm going to ask that we perhaps have an opportunity to ask staff questions about the presentation that's been made. So I'm going to open the floor up. Is there anyone who has an interest in asking staff any questions on this presentation? Looking around the room, seeing none of you. Okay, so I have some questions. Through you to Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, you've heard the presentation. You have been involved with this file for some time. Could you give us your overview in terms of the sector, where we are, how do we collaborate? Because I'm hearing from the presenter, what she's saying is that, yeah, individual institutions, organizations, and so on are going on their own. They can do that. But really, what needs to happen for us is to collaborate and to have that sector development. And I mean, I know I have John Priest, who's our sector person in this area, is here with us. So I'd really like to have some comments from you, Mr. Williams, and maybe Mr. Priest as well, to help us to understand what are some of the things that we need to put in place, the building blocks to help to really develop this area.
So I'll start off, and then John can jump in if he has anything to add. The city has long supported this sector. We initiated an organization called the Toronto Biotech Initiative 15 years ago, something like that, which morphed into something else and is now has TOHealth as a sort of leading area representative. There are other associations that are trade associations that represent the big pharma, for instance, and the non-patent pharma. But this is the only one that takes a holistic look at the cluster and is very supportive of the cluster, which I think is very needed. I think, as some of your question pointed out, more maturity is needed. The organization needs to have a more robust element. I would hope that it would follow in the path of the Toronto Financial Services Alliance, for instance, which has a major board, which has major funding along the lines of In Vivo, as Ella referred to in Montreal. So we're very supportive. We have both money and staff devoted to this sector. I think it's important for the whole region to be supportive of the sector. And I know that there's strong pharma north of the city and west of the city. So it's important for those communities to also support. It's important for the province and the federal government to support. I think having the Med Device conference next year is a tremendous boost for us. That's we talk about big pharma, but big device is also, and little device and tiny device are really important in this region as well. So we're very supportive. I'm very supportive, and I think we work pretty well with TOHealth, and I'll turn it over to John on the more particular day-to-day stuff.
Sure, thanks. So as a life sciences specialist, my opinion is that Ella and Michael are absolutely right. We, particularly on the international front, with things like seats coming into force, with what's going on in the States, we won't get another opportunity like this to grab part of the global stage. We have a lot of organizations working in this space already, from industry and from government, and if we can help glue those together, if we can all work towards a common goal, then yeah, we can easily outshine a lot of the other global centers that we're competing with.
Okay, thank you very much. Are any other questions of staff? Okay, seeing none. To speak, Councillor Grimes, I have you on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're the only person on my list at the moment. So,
request the General Manager, Economic Development and Culture to report to the Economic Development Committee on March the 1st, 2018 on possible City of Toronto resources available to support TOHealth initiatives. And I was great to see Ms. Smith. You're very fired up in your presentation. I'm fired up. And it's very important that, like Michael Williams said, that it's just not the City of Toronto, but we got to get our name on this deck right here. We got to have to get, but the region has to support it. Our friends at the federal and provincial government have to support it. But it's great that we have been supporting it. But we got to get our name on this deck. So with that, I look forward to that coming back in March to see how we can collaborate in our chair's words and help you guys out further. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, this is great. This is great news. This is good news. But it's not news in the sense for many members of council and this committee who have, over the past few years, have sensed the sea change in the city of Toronto. The feeling that we're making that transition from being the premier city of Canada to one of the premier cities of the world. I tease people when I welcome them to the center of the universe, or when I'm somewhere else and they ask me where I'm from, I tell them the center of the universe. Councillor Thompson and I co-chaired a whole bunch of business seminars a few years ago. And at one of them, a high-tech seminar, there was someone there from Hackernest, and his name was Sue Harris, and he began talking about boasting about Toronto. And I replied, well, we're Canadians. You know, we don't boast. Why would we boast? And he said very simply, directly, because we're competing for talent and investment. I think we have a story to tell, a brand that is waiting to be, in this instance, waiting to be shaped and dynamically presented to the world. As I said earlier, Drake's brand was coolness. And when I asked you for one word to describe this initiative, you said impact. And the word that I chose was excitement. This city is an exciting place in which to trade ideas, to create new products, to establish new relationships. I certainly wish you all the best. Now, we can overemphasize the role of government in economic development. Drake, The Weeknd, Lily Singh, Just Rain, Humble the Poet, all of these people succeeded without government assistance. And I think, and that's not to diminish the role of government, because there certainly is a role to be played. But when I thought of those names, I think that what we can do to build on their accomplishments going forward is to let people know that we have the environment that will allow individuals to succeed in whatever activity attracts their attention and their emotions and shapes their lives. So I think this city is going to be absolutely, I think the golden age awaits us, frankly, in the next few decades. And I think it would be exciting to be a part of that. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Anyone else to speak? Okay. I'll just add my voice to this. And we've met in my office, we've chatted at length, and you've met with others and so on. And I think that, you know, certainly we support, obviously, your energy, your passion, and where this organization needs to go, needs to get to. I actually wouldn't support going forward with a steering committee personally. I would think that there's a necessity for not-for-profit, unincorporated organization with a board of directors that are going to help to steer the future, because you're right, we're competing on a global scale. And I think there is a real need and necessity now for this organization to step up You're asking for further assistance and so on, which is necessary, it's needed, because you're right. Organizations in this city will continue to do what they do. But if we were to bring our resources, bring our research, bring a lot of our technical and sort of just the expertise in a way that will help this organization, not dissimilar to the TFSA and other organizations that we have actually been funders of and have been helpful in terms of its contribution and its development and so on. And so I think there's a real need for a review of that. And I'm hoping that when the general manager comes back with the report that's been asked for by Councillor Grimes, it will maybe highlight some of those things in terms of some of its own recommendations and so on. I think the structure is extremely important, and we will build on that in terms of our ability to support John Priest, who I've spent a fair amount of time with on some of the life sciences issues. We've had situations where we've had investors wanted to put $300 million in the City of Toronto, and the province has said, nope, we don't like it. And so there's a real need even to actually work with the province and so on, and the jobs that would create and so on, and they had a political difference in terms of how things should be and what have you, and there are many other places around the world who'd love that. And by the way, that investment was coming from Boston, of all places, because the things that you've identified, they had identified that those things exist here, and they wanted to be here, not in Boston. And so you're right, we have the foundation, we have a lot of the parts to build a really amazing sector. And so I think that we need to sit down, talk about what we need to do, put a plan in place to establish that framework. We have the talent, we have all the people to do it. Yep. And so I think the time is now. And as Councillor Kelly pointed out, you know, resources are one thing, and you don't necessarily need government resources to make things happen. But what I do think what we need in terms of government is that helping in terms of not only framework, but actually having that environment where things can have an opportunity to succeed with the sort of weight of government, because government does bring a tremendous amount of weight and can help organizations that are obviously well-structured and so on. So I would hope that some of the things that we've talked a little bit about here today could be incorporated into this narrative moving forward. General Manager is going to be coming back next year with the report, and we're hoping at that time we'll see this. And I want to say that over the last little while, we've been very successful in having a lot of firsts in Toronto, conventions happening outside of the United States. And it's a logical step to go north as opposed to go east, west, south, or elsewhere, because we're so close. There's a lot of, you know, commonality and a lot of distance between our two countries, no doubt. But, you know, bringing this sort of revenue is very helpful. And this does set the stage for that next bar that you're going to achieve, because not only do you centralize and focus on the place itself, but also the talents. You're shining a light on all these things. And I think this is extremely instrumental and helpful. So with that, I will basically move receipt of for information for, sorry, we have the motion. And so, right, we have Councillor Grimes' motion, so we'll vote on the motion first. Sorry, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried, thank you. And that's what we need for that. So thank you very much for your presentation today. Thank you. All right, so we're moving right along, members. We're now moving to ED 24.4, planting the seed of economic growth in Toronto's food and beverage sector. We have Ms. Dana McCauley, Executive Director of the Food Starter Program, is with us.
Thank you for your help.
No problem. Morning.
Sorry about that. We're
No worries.
trying to figure out some technical issues.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you so
You have
much.
10 minutes.
Chairman Thompson and to the rest of the councillors and other guests here. It's a real pleasure to come in and give you guys a status report on Food Starter. The city's been an incredibly generous supporter of this initiative. For those of you who aren't aware, Food Starter is a food business incubator and accelerator. So we are focusing on helping people who otherwise would not be able to explore their business ideas to do so. We help them to fail fast, fail cheap, and succeed fast and have real impact on the economy, not just of Toronto, but we think of the entire province and eventually the whole country. What makes Food Starter different from other types of incubators and accelerators that you no doubt have been, a part of in the past is that we are combining a maker space with training, mentorship, and the connections and co-mentoring that just don't exist for people who have food ideas. The original pilot project, the Toronto Food Business Incubator, proved two things. One, that there was lack of growth and innovation in the food business because of the barrier of cost of getting involved in food manufacturing. Before we existed, if someone had an idea, maybe even Drake, he's been mentioned a few times here today, about developing a food product, they would have to rent a facility, they would have to outfit it with food grade furnishings and equipment and invest a great deal just to find out if their concept could be proven. So where we're different from an R&D facility like, say, George Brown First or the Guelph Food centers and things like that nature, Niagara College, et cetera, is that we give people a place to commercialize their product, and that's the key word. If you come to Food Starter and you have this product developed, you've gone to an R&D center, if that product is a car, we're the road you get to drive it on. And that's very exciting. We have shared spaces, which we call our incubation spaces, where people can access by the hour equipment of a really high quality, very different from a commercial kitchen. It's small scale manufacturing equipment. So instead of making hundreds of cases of product, people make 10, 20, 50, and they can really scale their business up quickly. I noticed a couple of my clients out in the Nathan Phillips Square area this morning when I came in. They're selling direct to consumer, doing primary research right here at City Hall with the consumers who are outside. And we stay with them all the way through to acceleration when they are in, say, for instance, one of my clients who was selling direct to consumer on our first day, November 2nd, 2015, she and her family and their business are now in over 60 stores in Ontario. They're exporting to Whole Foods in the US, and they're creeping up the pages on Amazon Prime. So we're really seeing a lot of progress with our clients. We started, I was going to show you a video, but it's not working. But later on, if anyone's interested, go to the Food Starter YouTube channel, and you'll see our This is Food Starter video, as well as 4 or 5 success stories that profile clients of ours who've had great benefit from working at Food Starter. And this video was paid for with generous dollars from the City of Toronto, so thank you for that. Some of our metrics, so we're feeling like we're really making a big contribution. We're almost 2 years in. I would say we're coming out of our awkward teenage phase. We are almost fully finished with construction. Unfortunately, although the city was very generous, we were unable to get unrestricted dollars to this point from the province or from the federal government. So we haven't been able to 100% finish the facility or really optimize what we do. But despite that, we've created over 160 jobs. We've launched 80 product lines. We've served, these numbers were put on this slide in July. I would say that at this point, we've probably served over 160 companies in various capacities. One of our most popular programs is a market feasibility bootcamp, which is for pre-revenue companies who come in and make go, no-go decisions. Right now, we have 16 people in that program, and I think if we were to add it up for the whole year, it's around 40 companies who've just gone through, or 40 people who may create companies who've gone through just that program alone. As you can see in the bottom right corner, we did some research with our clients this summer, and one of the reasons they come to FoodStarter is because of the quality of the equipment and the fact that we have storage. We're a one-stop shop, and because we're a not-for-profit with support from the city, our prices are very reasonable, and that means that these companies can get going, put in a lot of sweat equity. They're all working very hard. They're all also contributing their own money, and they can start to build their business and scale their business before they need to take on any type of crippling debt, because they do all struggle with cash management. Growing a food business is difficult. It's a bit of a chicken and egg. You get a big order, then you have to buy a lot of ingredients and hire a lot of people, and there's always a lag, of course, between the PO and the check. But we feel like we're making great strides, and that with continued support, we'll really be able to have a big impact on the food sector, grow the number of small and medium-sized enterprises that are really the backbone of the food business, and will keep Ontario having a very vibrant food business. The big companies, they can so easily be lured to places like Alabama, who will give them really inexpensive wages and tax breaks, et cetera, to keep people in Ontario with our hourly wage going up and with hydro being expensive. I think we have to really grow homegrown talent who don't want to leave Ontario, who are using local produce, who are hiring local people, and making the next generation of family businesses that will, become iconic Canadian names. We're also doing a lot of collaborating. These are our academic collaborators. In some cases, we have MOUs with them where we trade in-kind services with them, so that then their professors or instructors will come and help our clients. That's the case with George Brown. With Durham, we have their students being placed to get valuable work experience with actual food companies. And unlike a normal placement, where if you were to go into one company and you'd only learn about one kind of food, with us having over 110 active clients, they get to try all different types of things, and that's, I think, really helping to get younger people kind of turned on. There's two paths you can take when you are a student in a program like Durham's. You can go either into pharma or you can go into food. And pharma has generally been more attractive pay and work conditions wise. And we're, I hope, getting some of the romance of the food business into these young people. We're also doing some really neat projects on an opportunistic basis with groups in Toronto that support people who can't pay to play at FoodStarter. So for instance, we developed a product for North York Harvest Food Bank, a soup. I developed the concept. One of our clients developed the flavor system. One of our trainers did the nutrition facts panel. And now we give the North York Harvest folks a place for free to make the soup, which they sell to Food Share, goes into those grab some good kiosks, and then for everyone that Food Share buys, one goes into a North York Harvest hamper. So we're proud of that, and we'd like to do more of that kind of work as well. Somehow we have been able to get on, in such a short time, on the international screen, and this is just a short list of the countries who've reached out to us and come to visit us. We've had more than two delegations from the Netherlands, and there may be a third. And we are trying to make as many of these connections stick, and a future plan is to maybe do some twinning with innovation centers in other countries so that our clients can have soft landing spaces when they want to grow their businesses. And in turn, we've offered that to these visitors. And we have a number of our growing businesses who are run by newcomers. We also have quite a few women, which is really nice to see, because having a 25-year-plus career in the food business, way back in the day, I was an unusual person at a boardroom table as a woman, and now we're seeing a lot of women starting businesses where they will chair the boardroom table. I added in some things into the appendix. We have a very robust 5-year plan. Our hope is that in 5 years, the percentage of funding that we get from the City of Toronto and any other government agencies will go down. We really want to create revenue streams that offset our dependence on funding, but it's a process, and we will continue to need your support, and we hope that yeah, well, I know we can count on it from the city. I hope that you guys can help us to also get more inroads with the province and the feds if possible. So thank you for your time.
Sorry, and we have questions now. Thank you very much. And Councillor Pragadakis.
So my questions are to Dana, but they could also be to staff because Food Starter is actually in the report. So I'll direct them to you, and then whoever wants to can answer them. There's a how to start a food business seminar. I was just wondering where are those run, and could someone, for example, ask that be done at a certain location, et cetera, and what would be involved in doing so?
So through you, Chair, we run them quarterly at North York Civic Center. We run them in the council chambers because the average attendance rate is about 70 individuals that come out to the seminar. We give an overview of the industry. We talk about things like branding as being very important for companies. We talk about the reality of starting a food business, and then we also introduce them to Food Starter as a potential starting point for them. I have done them in other areas of the city upon occasion. I've done one to the Syrian immigrant group. They brought about 20 people in Scarborough. So I'm open to doing them. I just don't want to take away from the large group that we get on a quarterly basis.
Okay. Dana, you mentioned about the soup mix, food share, and North York Harvest. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that soup mix.
I'd be thrilled to. Really proud that, when you work for a not-for-profit organization like Food Starter, that we can accommodate those kinds of requests. I was giving a tour to the executive director of North York Harvest, Ryan Noble, and Alvin Rebick, who at the time was with Food Share. And they were so excited about Food Starter, and they're like, well, we all need to be using this space and keeping it busy. This was very early days. And we just brainstormed that this could be a project that we could work on. It started, I think, as an idea in March or April of 2016, and we were able to launch the soup by last fall. They took the summer off, and they'll be coming back. They're using students who are adult students with disabilities from York Humber as the labor, so it's giving them work experience and skills development, and yeah, it's working out quite well. I think the project can be scaled. Right now, I would say it's still fairly small, and if North York Harvest had more resources, they could probably do more with it. We also, offer people running things like, for instance, Cater Toronto, which is working with a lot of newcomers and a lot of women. We give them our lowest price. Because we're open 24/7, we have pricing that that goes from peak hours into obviously the overnight. And so regardless of what time they work, we give them our peak, our non-peak hour rate. And we've done that for other organizations. The Newcomers Kitchen brought some people when they had a big event down at Union Station. And so we try to be good neighbors whenever we can.
Great. I was wondering if there's any funding from Trillium or Metcalf that Food Starter could access or apply for?
Yeah, we have applied for Trillium. We only just became eligible for it because right now, as we approach our second year of business, we have 2 years of audited financial statements. So although we had concepts they were interested in the past, we didn't meet their criteria. We haven't applied for anything from Metcalf, although Cater Toronto and I have talked about doing a joint application there. We just haven't gotten to it at this stage. But right now we have an application out to RED. We have a Greenbelt pre-approved application. We're just looking for a retail partner to work with us. So we're very aggressively looking for as many funding opportunities as possible. One of the issues for us, though, is most funding, now Trillium now has a capital fund, but most of the funding out there is restricted. It's usually program related and usually new programs. Well, our programs are working and we don't necessarily need to change them. We just need to continue them and enhance them. And then my other challenge is that I need money to finish capital projects, and that's where the city has been fantastic. We've been able to do a lot of construction, buy a lot of equipment, because you don't have those types of restrictions on your funding.
Could you tell me how Food Starter, or a little bit more about how Food Starter promotes or helps local farmers?
Sure. So our clients do not have to use local foods. For instance, we have a young woman who is an acai berry importer, and she's selling to juice bars and to manufacturers, and that's fine. But of course, it always makes economic sense to have your supply chain as close to, to your plant as possible. So when it makes sense, we are connecting, sometimes through Greenbelt, sometimes through partners at AMI or OMAFRA. We try to connect our entrepreneurs with local products. So right now, Fressy Bessie, one of our early success stories, she makes frozen fruit lollies, which are 100% fruit. And she was just going down to the food terminal to buy pears. Well, now we've been able, through our connections, to get her hooked up with some farmers, et cetera. And instead of just buying pears all year round, now she's buying them in season, processing them, freezing them, and then doing her production throughout the year. And so we try to. Our whole philosophy for marketing is that we position ourselves as connected, expert, and approachable. And part of being connected and expert is knowing all the supply chain players and having relationships with them.
So I'm not sure if you're able to, last question, I'm not sure if you're able to speak about this, but if you are able to, perhaps you could share with us some of the work the Food Starter is going to be doing with Woodbine Entertainment.
Yeah, thank you. So Woodbine Entertainment, I'm sure council knows because of course it had to be approved by you. They are developing the lands around the racetrack, and there'll be a lot of entertainment and gambling focused stuff, but they also will have a lot of mixed use areas. And when they were looking for ways to add food to that plan, we met and did some brainstorming, and I suggested that as much as local food is important, that they're in such a globally interesting area, not just for their population, but access to the airport. And from there, we've created a concept where we will workshop Malton, Rexdale area aspiring food entrepreneurs through taking their idea from concept to testing it and pop-ups actually on the grounds at Woodbine in the next year and a half, so that they will get a spot in the Woodbine Food Hall and get exposed to the millions of visitors that go to Woodbine on a yearly basis. So that's a really interesting way of us being able to take what we've developed at Food Starter, which is programming and expertise and tools, and we'll do that education actually in their community, probably at Woodbine or at a local community center, and really reach a whole new group.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, anyone else? Question? Councillor Hart?
I assume that one of your key measures of success is the job creation, and you've created 160 jobs in a fairly short period of time, which is great. Can you tell us what your 3-year plan is around job creation?
Well, you know, the plan starts with commercializing products, and as the products are commercialized, everything else will follow, because obviously if you have more volume sales, you need more hands to develop those products. We do have some impact numbers that we're putting together. They are being validated right now, and we meet regularly with the Economic Development Office and share that info, and happy to share when it's in good shape, something that we can stand behind with you. But what I'm excited about on the job side is that besides the fact that there are these $11 an hour, you know, assembly jobs, et cetera, as our companies are growing, we're also hoping that through those academic collaborations that we'll be able to hook our clients up with technology solutions and other types of innovation happening in the province, so that we're creating better quality jobs. Like, I would much rather have somebody who's learning how to operate or fix an advanced technological piece of manufacturing equipment than just seeing somebody scoop spices into a bag and use a heat sealer. So we are conscious of the fact that not all jobs are equal jobs.
Just a follow-up question. Do you ensure, as part of that process, that the job distribution is citywide? How do you roll out jobs across the city?
Well, it's interesting. We do connect with our local councillor DeGiorgio's office and with the MPP Laura Albanese's office, as well as with the schools and the colleges, to do a call for people to work with our clients. We're always sort of keeping a pool. That is sometimes more successful than others. You know, the Durham students, obviously they're from all over the place. But our area, we're at Keelan Lawrence, and there are a lot of high rises and a lot of people who are really eager for even just kind of piecework. So a lot of the people do come from the neighborhood, and we've got pretty good transit. So it's not necessarily at this point very regional, but my hope is as our clients outgrow the capacity of our facility, that then they will start to build their facilities around the city and tap into more wards.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holland?
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. So in terms of the, you have the collaboration with the different colleges and university, I see as well. So are you working with the incubators there? And obviously they have a lot. I mean, I know U of T has 10 hubs and Ryerson has 11 zones alone. And so are you working with them in terms of that collaboration with those incubators?
Yeah, as much as possible. You know, we're a very small team. There's just 5 of us. So I certainly have met with people from, you know, many U of T and Ryerson incubators. I also had some conversations with the X1 incubator at McGill to talk about how we could help their food processing specific clients. To that point, we've done info sessions, more focused than Michael's How to Start a Food Business seminars, more you know, tightly focused on food manufacturing. And to this point, we haven't had a lot of people from those areas join Food Starter. One, a company that is doing aquaponics, they have a space at the Brickworks, was the result of me speaking at Seneca. And it's interesting, I'm finding that more college-level kids many of them are adults, college-level students are ready to come into someplace like Food Starter, which is very, hands-on and practical, than the universities, where I think that'll be a longer incubation period, sorry about the pun, for us to figure out how to work together. I think they'll probably use Food Starter more as a testing space for technology, food safety systems, and we are having those conversations, but nothing's come to fruition yet that I could point to and call a success.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Okay, anyone else to speak? Oh, you have a question? That's fine. Well, if you'd let me know, I would actually respond. Question of staff.
Thanks. So I was just wondering, through you to staff, what programs does TESS offer that involve the food sector, if any?
So I've worked with our partners in TESS to develop two programs primarily. The first one came out of the Community Food Skills Program, which Toronto Public Health was delivering with individuals who were on Ontario Works. And they were teaching them how to cook and prepare nutritional meals for their own families. When I met with them, I said, well, that's great. If they have those skills for their own families, then they can use those similar skills to get a job within the food industry, because there are a lot of entry-level jobs that are required in the industry. And so we developed a program called Entry Level to Food Processing, which in 2012 won the City Managers Award for collaboration between divisions. It was TESS, Toronto Public Health, Economic Development, and it's delivered by the Toronto District School Board, Adult Education. And they've had a tremendous success rate. I don't know how many people they've put through the program since 2012 when it was developed, but the success rate is well in the 70% range of individuals who take the program and find jobs, entry-level jobs within the industry. And then subsequently, we developed a program for youth who have graduated from post-secondary institutions in programs that gave them a great education, but not a practical, necessarily one that they got jobs from. And they take a 9-week course that gives them quality assurance certificates, food handling certificates, recall information, et cetera. There's about 16 certificates that they get, and then we get them a placement with a food manufacturer. And in those instances, we've had over a 90% placement rate of these students. The industry is loving it because they get a graduate of, say, an engineering course that comes to them and can look at their production line and let them know how they can improve their productivity. But they're hired as a production supervisor, for argument's sake. And so it's been a great connection, those two.
I was just going to add that one of our 5 employees came through that program.
Can't.
I can't? Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
it's just questions for staff only at this point. Councillor Fracadakis.
Yeah, sorry, just to follow up with Michael, thanks so much for that answer and for all that great work that's happening. And I had asked this to Dana earlier, and I'm going to ask you this question about funding from Trillium and Metcalf. And do you see any things that we could be applying for Food Starter through those? And perhaps you have a different perspective as staff.
So when we were originally setting up the Toronto Food Business Incubator and Food Starter, we had approached Metcalf, and the answer at that time was, because we were a not-for-profit organization that was creating for-profit organizations, we weren't, we couldn't apply to their programs. So as we've grown and as they've come to the realization that maybe it's a good idea to teach people how to run their own businesses and develop skills, there's more opportunity to develop programming that we can go back to a Metcalf or a Trillium and apply now for for funding. They're very interested in what we're doing. As Dana mentioned, it's just bringing the right partners to the table.
Great, thanks very much.
Can I jump in? Councillor, can I just build on Michael's answer? We have worked with Food Starter, with both OMAFRA and the Ministry of Economic Development and Growth to see if we could find some funding, and we continue to work on that. There's an event tomorrow, which hopefully will move that along as well.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rakadakis. Anyone else to question? Okay, no, to speak, Councillor Rakadakis.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I have a motion, and it's that we request that the GM of ECDev and Culture, in consultation with the Medical Officer of Health and other relevant city staff, report to this committee by April of next year on how programs like Food Starter might be leveraged to support some other city policy priorities, including poverty reduction, job training, entrepreneurialism, environmental protection, climate change mitigation, and to consider what resources might be available, both private and public, to support any proposed initiatives. And Food Starter is an excellent initiative, which I think recognizes Toronto as a major center for food processing and manufacturing and builds the skills necessary for encouraging the growth of the food sector. I think there's an opportunity, as we've heard from both Dana and from Michael, to strengthen some of our city programs, not to take away from what Food Starter is doing, but to see how its success might actually foster some others and their success. You know, we can get some support for job creating, poverty reduction, food center initiatives. I think some of that's already happening, as we've heard, but I think there's certainly some opportunity to see what else is out there. So, I mean, as we mentioned earlier with another deputant, this city competes on the world stage, and to do so, we need to be a center of innovation. So I think that there's a lot of churn in this day and age and a lot of products that are part of our daily lives, and I think the food and beverage industry is a critical part of any economy, and it's critical for me, and I think for members of this committee, that we continue to foster creativity in this sector and in others. So I hope that you can support my motion.
Okay, anyone else to speak? Okay, seeing none, the item motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, Dana. All right, so moving right along, members. We're now moving to ED 24.5. We have a list of speakers on this particular item, and we have a presentation. So we'll start with the presentation first. Yeah, thanks.
That would be great.
So we have Ms. Elaine Baxter TOHealth, and who's the General Manager for Children's Services, and Mike Williams, General Manager for Economic Development, to make their presentation to us this morning. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're very pleased to be here today to present the economic and social impacts of accessible, high-quality childcare in Toronto. I wanted to begin the presentation just by giving you a little bit of context. Toronto Children's Services is the legislated service system manager for childcare and early learning in Toronto. We run the second largest childcare system in the country, second only to Quebec. It includes 73,000 licensed childcare spaces and over 1,000 licensed childcare centres. And we currently have fee subsidies for 40% of the spaces that are available. At present, there are many challenges in childcare, but we're fortunate to be in a growth period. The primary challenge is access, and if you see on the screen, the primary challenge for access is in younger children from birth to 4 years of age, where there are enough spaces to address only 31% of that population, and enough fee subsidies to address only 8%. So this is a focus of our growth. Which brings me to the next slide. A few months ago, Council did approve our growth strategy. It's a very aggressive strategy for growing early learning and childcare over the next 10 years, with a specific focus on children from birth to 4 years of age. The goals of the strategy are to ensure that 50% of the child population have access to childcare, that 50% of that 50%, so 25% of the child population have access to fee subsidies, and that fees for childcare reduced by 25 to 40%. When we did our demand and affordability study with University of Toronto last year, we discovered that childcare was considered unaffordable for 75% of the child population because it consumed more than 10% of the family's income. So the remainder of this presentation will highlight some of the economic and social benefits of quality licensed childcare, and I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Elaine. Good morning. I think I know enough to push the button right away. So there's a rich body of research, published research, academic research on the impacts of childcare on the economy and on the social welfare of a city or a region or a province. And so staff relied on that body of research to investigate 5 different ways that childcare can positively impact our society. First one is just straight economic impact, more jobs or more impact. Second one is increased labor force participation, particularly of women in financially challenged families. Reduce poverty and reliance on government programs as people become more self-reliant. Improved child development outcomes, which is a long-term societal goal, which I think is probably the main goal that we all have. And increased social networks for families as they have a common point of congregation. We'll step through each of these 5 points. I'll address the first 2. Elaine will address the last 3. So on economic impacts, the more childcare, there's more employment in the childcare world. The dollar goes a long way when supporting childcare, as childcare workers are less expensive than other employment, which means that $1 million, for instance, can generate 36 jobs. You can do the math. You can see what we mean about pay levels. The economic impacts rely on the fact that there are trained people to work available in childcare, and part of Elaine's program is to address that issue. There's not much sense, or it's tough putting more money into a system that doesn't have the people that can work in the system that are properly qualified. The return on a longer term, in terms of increase to the GDP, is positive. 1.36% was found in Toronto by the Centre for Spatial Economics. And in Quebec, they found that there was a net positive of $200 million to the GDP when you take into account money spent to it and the money that comes out of the increased economy. In terms of family impacts, the increased childcare clearly means that more parents can work in the labor force. So the labor force participation rate, as this chart shows, Quebec's had a longer history of universal childcare than most places, that all mothers went up 12%, the participation rate, which is a very significant boost for them. And then for those that live in vulnerable, financially challenged families, the increase was almost a quarter. So that clearly allowing mothers to return to the workforce is a very positive outcome for the economy for a lot of reasons, not the least of which the low female participation rate means that the economy cannot benefit from a lot of the trained and competent people that otherwise spend all the time at home. Over to you, Elaine.
Thank you, Mike. So I'll now talk a little bit about the social and developmental benefits and impacts of childcare, beginning with stronger child development, which creates a stronger future workforce. As we know, brain development occurs in children very early, and the critical years really are from birth to 6. This is when brain functions rapidly develop and that determine how well a child will speak, how they perform in school, their skills in math or music, and their ability to form friends and other critical life skills. Early childhood educators, which are now a registered profession, are professionals trained in how to facilitate experiences and interactions that advance learning and overall cognitive development in children. Research has shown that participation in high-quality childcare programs can lead to better cognitive outcomes later in life. A U.S. study, if you look at the slide, did highlight that children that participated in preschool saw school test scores increase from the 30th to the 50th percentile, and also a dramatic increase in graduation rates from high school. TD Economics recognized that cognitive development advancements that occur through quality childcare can create future workers that are more productive, more innovative, and earn higher wages with fewer levels of poverty. And that was a study that TD did a couple of years ago. So accessing childcare is also critically important for parents. Anyone who has experienced picking their children up at those critical times after work, aside from the panic of getting there on time, really can see the relationships that develop between the parents themselves and also with the parents and the early childhood educators. While there's limited empirical evidence supporting this, it's well known that childcare centres are recognized as a centralizing hub in neighbourhoods. Parenting is challenging, and these parent-to-parent relationships can provide increased support for parents as they grapple with the common decisions and challenges that they face during parenthood. One study found that parents with increased friendships made through childcare experience greater psychosocial benefits, including less isolation and lower rates of depression. And as you can see, this is particularly important for single-parent families and also for newcomers. And finally, we must note that in order to achieve these benefits, in order to benefit from the true impacts on children and families, continued government investment is required to ensure that we're able to develop accessible, affordable, and available childcare. The quality of care is particularly important to generate these outcomes, and in 2016, the City of Toronto's assessment for quality improvement in childcare showed that 96% of centres in Toronto are providing excellent or above average care. This is very important and shows a 20% increase since 2014. So we're clearly in a great position as we embark on growth, but addressing affordability and access will be a challenge that will be with us for the next 10 years. We'll be reporting to CDRC at the end of the month with the implementation plan for the first 3 years of the childcare growth strategy, which we're hoping will really begin to see the impact on both salaries, fees, as well as access. So thank you very much, and we're happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Visiting councillors first, we have Councillor Davis. Oh, that's right, yes. So you're right, thank you. Snap, thanks. Yes, so thank you very much. No, actually, no. Councillor Davis, we will hear the deputation, but I think we'll take the questions of staff now. Okay, we'll hear the deputies after. You can ask. I understand, but we're going to hear from staff now. So if you've got questions of staff, please ask the questions of staff.
Okay, there's one conclusion in your report that takes a general finding from, I think it's from Quebec, and applies it to the Toronto economy. And it was quite a striking number. And it had to do with the gender gap. And you took McKinsey and Company, I guess, that research, and it said that increasing the number of hours worked by women added to the national GDP, and you applied it to Toronto and said that reducing the gender gap could be estimated at $15.8 billion. That is a huge number, and it's very, very significant that if women were working more hours and had a greater access to childcare and working more hours, there would be quite a significant impact on our local economy.
That's correct. In the Quebec model, they found that women's participation in the workforce increased by 12 percentage points in 3 years from 1997, when the $7 a day or $5 a day, I believe it was at that time, childcare was introduced, to 2000, and it's continued to increase since then. So the assumption is, while that was increasing, participation in Toronto was relatively stagnant. So the assumption is that if childcare were more accessible and affordable, we would see increased female participation in the workforce.
So it's not only a women's issue from an equality perspective, it has a huge impact on the local economy, or would, if we increased participation rate.
It absolutely would, and the greatest benefit that came through was certainly for women, but clearly it benefits all families to have that access, and it benefits the economy.
We also have to have the jobs available for those people to fulfill the total potential. But assuming in a rapidly growing economy, which we've had, there would be a good chance that that employment would be available.
I'm sorry, Mike, I didn't understand.
So
That you said we have to have the jobs.
by increasing participation rates, you make more women available for the labor force.
Right.
On the opposite side, or not, to go along with that, you need the jobs for those people to be available.
Right.
So, and we have 8% unemployment that's been going down, which is closer to 7 right now. So that means that jobs have been available. I'm not sure it depends on what time in the economic cycle that the women would come on board. What happened in Quebec was that the jobs stayed, even though the economy partially tanked in the late 2000s. So there was a very robust adherence to increased participation, which was very positive.
Right. One of the issues you've identified, again, is the affordability question, and that childcare is beyond the reach of the majority of families, huge majority of families in Toronto. Your next report is going to address the issue of affordability and how much we're going to commit to addressing that issue.
The next report will focus on the first 3 years, 2017 to 2019, of the growth strategy, and what we are hoping to do is achieve a 10% reduction in the top third of fees over that 3 years. The goal for the 10-year plan is to reduce fees by between 25 and 40%. The growth and demand study, the demand and affordability study found that fees would really overall have to be reduced by at least 25%, the top tier of them, in order to make a material impact on family access.
Okay. One of the other issues that I think emerged is in terms of access and affordability was the desire to look at changing the structure of the system to create changes in access so that there would be a different type of sliding scale fee structure so that more families could get some financial assistance to pay for childcare. Is that still something that we're working on? And I think there was going to be some input to the province on that.
Okay,
That's
your last
correct.
question, Councillor.
And the report that would be coming forward recommends community engagement to address affordability. Basically, the affordability measures we're looking at is increased government investment through the general operating grant, but also looking at what kind of legislative changes would be beneficial, and one of those would be a sliding scale overall, or also a sliding scale related to fee subsidies, which we have, but that scale has not been updated since 2006. So we will be exploring and consulting on that.
Okay, thank you. To bring it into committee, Councillor Frakadakis.
Thanks very much. Your report mentions the Fortin report's finding that the long-term improvements in the labor force outcomes for mothers in Quebec were so strong that several researchers have calculated that the program increased tax revenue at all levels of government by more than the cost to subsidize childcare. And I was wondering if you think that there's any reason to believe that Quebec's cultural difference would mean that there would not be similar economic growth in Ontario.
I think if we were able to provide childcare at the same rates that Quebec provides it as, there would definitely be the same economic impact. The growth in Quebec was very rapid, as you can imagine, when they first introduced the system. So some of the challenges that will have to be addressed as we embark in this growth is ensuring that we maintain quality programs as we expand. And the key to doing that is to begin to address the compensation of the workforce. The majority of childcare workers are not well compensated, and that's why there is a real issue with recruitment and retention.
Okay, in your slide deck here, I think it's page 7, it notes that in Quebec, with the introduction of universal childcare, the poverty rates for single mother households dropped from 52% before the introduction of universal childcare to 31% by 2011. And during this time, 104,000 single mothers and their children moved out of poverty. Between 1998 and 2008, single-parent families on social assistance in Quebec decreased by 55%, while their average median net income increased by 81%. And I was wondering if there's any other jurisdiction that's brought in a childcare program like Quebec's, and if so, were the poverty reduction impacts similar?
There hasn't been any other programs like that in Canada. Certainly there are more accessible programs in Europe where childcare is universal and made available. I don't have the statistics on them with me on poverty, but it's certainly something we can look into. Logically, it makes sense that if childcare is affordable and women and families are able to remain or re-enter the workforce, that there will be benefits.
Right. On page 8 of the report, it notes that quality early education programs that address racial, religious, and ethnic tensions and incidents can also confront prejudices and can help increase a sense of belonging for children and their families. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Certainly. When our quality assessment tool for childcare looks at a number of things, including interactions and program materials. And one thing we look at is that the interactions and materials really reflect and respect the diversity of Toronto's population. So it is creating an atmosphere of inclusion and understanding, and that is a priority for the criteria, and centres are evaluated on their ability to address that. We also provide resources through Children's Services to the broader community to assist them in recognizing diversity and including it into their programming.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Anyone else in committee? Okay, Councillor Hart, yep.
It's just a question. Your report back, will you be commenting on the poll that I read this morning, DART Insight and Communications poll that was conducted on behalf of News Talk 1010? It indicated out of 814 adults surveyed in Toronto last month, 70% of respondents support Torontonians having access to fully funded public daycare. Will you be commenting on that?
The report's written, Councillor, so no. But we're happy to, we will be doing a presentation at committee, and we're happy to comment on it. It is quite consistent with what we heard during the growth and affordability study, where the consulting team from University of Toronto did extensive outreach with parents and service providers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hart. Okay, no more questions? Thank you. Okay, so we have a number of speakers. We have Alejandra Ruiz Vargas, and next up is Pura Just, and then we will have Jane Mercer, Toronto Coalition for Better Childcare. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation too.
You may, you have 5 minutes to speak, and you may begin now.
Yes.
You each have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. So, my name is Alejandra, and he's Puria, and we're coming from Acorn. And as you know, Acorn is an organization who fight for social justice, and we are low-income and moderate-income earners. And we are here because childcare matters. We had started a campaign for affordable childcare called $10 and Change. We are here to speak to you today, not only as members of Acorn, but also as parents struggling to afford the cost of childcare in Toronto. Puria and I are both single parents and whose lives has been impacted negatively by the price tag of childcare, which can reach as high as $2,000 per month. Puria is going to talk with you later, but I'm going to speak something that really affects my life. The lack of affordability childcare is related to poverty in a very direct way. No childcare, no opportunities. When a low-income family doesn't have affordable childcare, the chance to get out of poverty is very limited. And for other families, the chance to get into poverty is imminent. I feel penalized myself because when my income increased, my fee subsidy decreased. So that gives me the feeling that when you go climbing in a mountain and there are a lot of fresh air and you finally thinking that you're going somewhere, and then you feel that somebody pushed you down and you found yourself tired, actually more tired and more frustrated. So, so it's time for a change. The city of Toronto needs to adopt the change, $10 and change for childcare for everybody. So now, Boria, you can continue.
Thanks, Alejandra. So,
So we've given you 5 minutes to speak. You've taken 2. I'd like to have an opportunity for members to ask you questions directly, and then you will have your 5 minutes, sir.
Oh, sure.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, sir. Now you now have 5 minutes.
okay, great. Good morning.
Morning.
So I've been fascinated with the conversation this morning, mainly because I've co-founded a couple of companies myself. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I was actually a participant in one of the City of Toronto incubator programs in the past, and that had us actually scale up one of our companies and create a lot of jobs, so thank you. And I see this as an opportunity for the City of Toronto. So, you know, with childcare, it's an, as I'm gonna share with you guys, you know, and it's already been shared, it's an investment that's gonna clearly have returns for the city. So, councillors, as you've read in the report, funding childcare is extremely beneficial to the economy. For every dollar invested in childcare, the government gets back at least $1.50. The best example of this benefit occurred in Quebec when they implemented their publicly funded childcare program in 1997. In the years following 97, Quebec's universal $7 a day childcare program more than paid for itself. Quebec's childcare program increased the number of women in the workforce by 3.8%, pumped an additional $5.2 billion into the Quebec economy, and raised the province's gross domestic product by 1.7%. While the City of Toronto's 10-year licensed childcare growth strategy is a step in the right direction, the government can benefit so much more by helping struggling parents, and Acorn has the blueprint. So there are a number of terms here. The first one is a geared-to-income sliding fee scale capped at $10 a day. Second is set a limit on the amount that childcare centers, including for-profit centers, can charge parents. Third is increase operational funding for public and nonprofit childcare centers. Fourth is increase the number of childcare centers and spaces in underserved wards and communities. Fifth is increase funding to centers to expand programming for parents who perform shift work and overnight hours. Six is simplified access to subsidy enrollment that does not require travel and/or internet access. 7 is use libraries, community centers, and apartment buildings as spaces for childcare. 8, funding programs based on fair wages for registered early childhood educators. 9, everyone who works in a childcare center should be paid a living wage. And finally, number 10, increase funding to the childcare sector at all levels of government. While some of these demands are under provincial and federal jurisdiction, we cannot do this without your support. By supporting our $10 and change campaign, the City of Toronto can become a leader in the fight for gender equity and poverty reduction. In a recent poll, as was mentioned earlier, commissioned by News Talk 1010, 70% of Torontonians support universally accessible childcare. As single parents, the choice for us is clear. It seems your constituents agree. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Are there any questions for our speakers? Okay, seeing none. Visitors, visiting members, none. Members of committee, none. Okay. Thank you both very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Jane Mercer from the Toronto Coalition for Better Childcare. Jane, welcome. You have 5 minutes. I'll start the clock once you've had a chance.
Thank you very much.
You're all ready? Excellent.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to this report. My name is Jane Mercer, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Toronto Coalition for Better Childcare. We represent over 20,000 families in our member centres and like to speak also, we hope, for the thousands more who desperately need access to affordable, high-quality childcare. We are very pleased to see this report come before you today and to have seen Toronto's 10-year licensed childcare growth strategy adopted by Council almost unanimously earlier in the year. We would like to thank Council, through you, for the leadership you have shown at this critical time for Toronto families right across the city. And that leadership is noted not only by your constituents, Torontonians right across the city, but also by the province. And when they see you move, they move, and boy did they move this year. The provincial government and the federal government came through with a stronger investment in childcare this year than we have seen in longer than any of us can remember. As your staff report clearly lays out for you, childcare is of vital importance to Toronto's economy, to the young workforce living in this city, and those we need to attract and retain in this city. I've had the benefit here of listening to a lot of other reports, and it's all about attracting talent and attracting strong people into our workforce, so that is great. But they aren't going to come if they can't afford to live here and if they can't afford to raise their families here. By investing in childcare, we're not only supporting the families we have, we're attracting more people to live in the city, we're supporting this workforce, which is so important, and the workforce of tomorrow, and that's your short and your long term covered off. This issue is much bigger than one report or one budget cycle. It is a commitment to families. Come and live and work in Toronto. We want you here. We will make room for you. We will support you. It is crucial to every ward that we support childcare as an incredibly important part of our city's infrastructure. Just as important as the roads that carry people into town is the support you give them in the soft services. And our failure to address it in recent decades has been driving young families out of our city to Peel, Whitby, Hamilton. Now, I don't have the stats to back that up, but I certainly know that anecdotally we talk about it all the time. Young families that can't afford to stay. They move to Peel and Hamilton and Whitby, and then they pay their taxes to those municipalities and they work out there. Or maybe they commute back in, overloading our roads and our public transit. We have to support our young families in this city. If they're earning a good income, then maybe they've tried to buy a house here. But now they are mortgaging that house. They are pouring into their RRSPs. They are leaning on their parents just to pay for childcare. If they are low-income families, they are in way more dire straits. They are hitting the food banks because they can't afford the childcare. They are sleeping on their sister's couch because they can't afford the childcare. We are driving them below the poverty line and we are driving them into homelessness, and these are our families. We thank you and your staff for your work on this report, and to just wrap up, I would say that Toronto's 10-year childcare growth strategy, is an excellent roadmap for the next 10 years, but it does make clear that we need significant and sustained investment from all three levels of government. So we cannot have any one level of government drop the ball on childcare. And I can assure you, all parent eyes will be on our city budget at the end of December to watch those childcare dollars come through.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mercer.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Mercer? Okay, visiting members, seeing none. Into committee. Okay. All right. To speak, Councillor Davis.
First, thank you to the people who waited or came here and waited to share their views. I had the opportunity to be at a recent forum that ACORN organized and where there were lots of parents talking about their personal struggles to find and pay for childcare and the personal toll it took on their lives, both being able to access the workforce and also the stress that it created on families. And I know that the stories I heard there are stories that we all hear as councillors in our communities about the struggle to find and pay for childcare in the City of Toronto. What I appreciate as well is the report that is before us, and I want to thank our Children's Services and ECDEV, Economic Development staff, for this report. And I think Councillor Fletcher, who requested it some time ago. So what it emphasizes is the other important benefits of childcare. We know that good childcare, good quality childcare is very good for children, and there's lots of evidence to show that. What this report reinforces is that access to good quality childcare is great for our economy as well. And I think the experience in Quebec has also demonstrated, and it has been documented as well, that the costs associated with childcare are fully recovered and more, both in terms of participation, both direct and indirect impacts on the economy and participation rates of families, of women, and the lowering of poverty as a result of having a job and of having access to childcare to get that job. So it's very clear that the payoff is well worth the investment, both for the people involved and for our economy. And I was struck by that one number that I pulled out, $15.8 billion impact potentially in Toronto if you make the same assumptions that were and conclusions from the Quebec study. So thank you again. And I think as Ms. Mercer said earlier, the big test always does come with the budget. We often approve various strategies, and then when the time comes for the budget, we seem to forget about our commitment to those things. So we have committed to maintain a 20% contribution from the municipal level to match the federal and provincial partners who have provided a very significant amount of money, $35 million in 2017 and 18. We're going to see additional capital money, and it's our job to make sure that we are both a partner in delivering services and managing them, which we're mandated to do, as well as making a contribution as a financial partner, or funding partner with the federal and provincial governments. Over the last 10 years, we've gratefully accepted money from those levels of government and used it to balance the budget. And so I think it's time to say those monies need to go where they were intended to go, and that is to fund childcare to assist children and families and our economy in the City of Toronto. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Bring the matter into committee. Anyone to speak? Okay, Councillor Hart.
I think what's terrific about this report, especially being tabled at this committee, is that it shows that childcare has a great return on investment. You know, we know about the social good, we know about the good for families in terms of allowing people to work and enjoy their lives, and the interaction of children with other children and the education that they get in the childcare system. But this shows a return on investment. And I think one of the things I've noted over the years in the childcare system is that really, to me, it's about early, and most of us have probably used this system, it's really about early childhood education to me. I mean, the kids come out of that system better educated, better socialized, and more productive members of society. And I think the more we can think about early childhood education versus the term childcare, the more attention and the more funding this program will get that it rightly deserves.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hart. Anyone else? Okay, I'm just going to speak briefly. I will move the recommendation that's here. I too want to lend my voice, certainly to thank the presenters with Acorn who are here with us this morning, and also the staff, Ms. TOHealth Baxter, Mr. Williams, and others who brought this report forward. I think it's important that we realize the investment that we contribute to this area of childcare is an investment in our future. It's not an investment simply to suggest to respond to just a basic call for help. It's an investment for a call for a better future for all. And so the report, speaks to moving forward and so on. And I think that it's been said by Ms. Mercer in terms of, in essence, we need to put our money where our mouth is if we're going to be supporting childcare moving forward, because of the benefits. And we've seen from the report Ms. TOHealth Baxter put forward with respect to Quebec and so on. And the thing is, if Quebec can do it, I think Ontario can do it better, and Toronto certainly can do it better. So I know what the delay is, because we just don't have the political will at the moment. But I think we need to translate that into looking at the numbers from Quebec and demonstrating the political will to move forward. Like we invest in many other things, in planting trees, roads, and a variety of other infrastructure development. Children are the foundation of our infrastructure. Without them, we don't build roads, we don't build condos, we don't build anything, we don't build a society. And so it's really important for us to help families. I did talk a little bit about this some time ago, and someone said to me, well, if people can't afford children, why are they having them? And I was shocked, actually, because I thought, that's not the narrative of the discussion. We want to have children, we want to help people to create opportunities and have better jobs and all of the things that are necessary. When your child is sick, I mean, I think that if you are, as all parents, you're focused on them getting better. When your child is not eating, you want them to eat. We have a variety of different programs in schools to help children with breakfast programs and a variety of initiatives and so on. People say, well, why do you do that? Well, because they're not eating, and we want them to eat before they learn, because if they don't eat, they can't really learn in a way that we want them to learn and so on. And in a society like ours, a civil society like ours, we're rich. We're like really, really super rich. Like, don't let anybody fool you. There is a lot of money in this city. There are a lot of wealthy people here. In fact, many could live to be 1 million years young and never spend every dollar that they actually have. And in fact, we need to ensure that some of those resources are invested back into our communities. And so, there's a lot of work to be done. And so I don't think it's simply about budgets. It's about commitment. And I think if we're not committed, then it's a demonstration on us that we're not really serious and we don't take this matter seriously and so on. And we should, we must, we will, so that we actually can demonstrate goodwill. We don't have to prove anything to anybody other than ourselves. Then we have to ensure that we take care of the future of our country and our cities and our communities and so on. Future our children. And what we do for them at an early age will help them to spark and demonstrate that amazing, outstanding accomplishment that we all have in our dreams for them. And so we can't just dream without actually investing in them, because it doesn't actually measure up. We can dream and not invest, and accomplishment is not. But if we dream and we invest, the accomplishment for our children will be such that they will achieve those goals and objectives in this city of art, culture, investment, bio-pharma, biomed, bio this and that, in terms of things that we've all been talking about for our children. So this report is timely, and I'm one of those who, along with many of us here, will be obviously championing the efforts to bring about the changes to address this fundamental problem for a lot of families in our city. Okay, thank you. Councillor, did you wish to speak?
Question of you.
Okay, please.
You moved the recommendation, so I'm wondering if you would consider it a friendly amendment if we actually had council receive this report for information instead of just this committee, because I understand that they're meeting at CDR later.
That'd be fine, Councillor. That'd be fine. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so good. That'll be fine. Yep. Sure. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor.
Consider it moved.
Yes. Are we okay? So, yeah, so on Councillor Rakadakis' amendment, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Okay, thank you. We are good. Thank you very much. We have one item left, members. It was being held by Councillor Holland. Councillor Holland's not here. Councillor Grimes is moving the staff recommendations. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Madam Clerk, do you have anything else? Ladies and gentlemen, we move we adjourn. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. We are, what?